as an adult, I realize that I'm responsible for my life. I have held on to resentment, and maybe there's been, the key word these days is trauma, but I don't love it for me so much. I don't love it for me so much. I prefer to say that I held on to some things that didn't serve me, and later on I was able to release them through the work of consciousness and awareness and all of this.
Hi, Tommy. Hi, everyone. Excited to be on this path of discovery, and I'm in recovery, Tommy. And I'd say the last couple of years, mainly with R2O, have been just a different type of recovery. I would say I was more in a battle of abstinence before R2O, and then that's a whole different ball game than being on this path of discovery. So thank you for that. And with that, I think just a little pre-frame here. I started drinking and smoking weed when I was about 12 years old, and it became a habit pretty quickly. So I'd say certainly a social habit at 13 or 14, and a daily habit by high school, and it stayed for a long time until like my early 50s. And I didn't realize it until lately. It seems that the more connected I seem to be with consciousness, the more my recovery takes hold. And I see this as kind of a gift. I'm just not, what I'm going to share with you, I'm just not quite sure if I'm handling it completely right. But I'm finding that there's a lot of memories. Literally, that would have been like 1977 when I started, right? And there's all this stuff coming back from me being 12 years old: music, friends. And at first, it was all like kind of nostalgic and cool. I'm getting super into Paul McCartney again and stuff like that, right? And so there's some really cool stuff. And then every now and then, just like a lightning bolt out of nowhere, there'll be a very clear recollection of abuse or neglect, or all with my dad. And I've already had my dad has appeared a few times in my step work, and I've done my amends and done some things there. And I don't feel like this is particularly a bad thing. These memories they're sort of painful when they hit, because they're almost like, oh, to give an example of one, he was a very strong disciplinarian. That's all I thought of it as before, strong disciplinarian, right? And then one memory that came back very recently was him doing it for show. So sort of humiliating me through discipline in front of his buddies and my uncles and stuff like that, which I had just kind of zoned out, but it's a very clear memory now. So the initial feeling is being pissed off and resentful, followed by, what do I want to do with this information? Do I want to go to him now? And every time I have one of these thoughts and talk to him about it, we're not really that close. Will it do anything for him? And ultimately, will it do anything for me? And I'm not walking around every day in angst over these things. They're almost like aha moments. It explains things to me. It helps me understand kind of maybe why I was attracted so much by an older crowd and drugs and alcohol at a young age. So I'm not looking for a stamp of approval necessarily. I just want to make sure that I'm processing things correctly, because this is very new and these memories are coming back frequently, and they're all kind of in this same lane, nostalgic cool things and some shitty things that I've just sort of drowned out through alcohol and weed over the years. So yeah, I'll kind of pause there. Would love to hear your thoughts on that. I have heard other people reflect on kind of nostalgic type memories after their drug or alcohol use has stopped for a period of time. And so, but I've never really heard that addressed by you. And is that a super common thing?
Thank you so much, Ken. I love this inquiry for many, many reasons, and not the least of which is I have a lot of experience with it personally. Memory, nostalgia, father, mother, different stuff coming up at different times. The first thing that occurs to me to bring up here is that I believe that there's a reason for these awakenings, I'll call them. So something comes up into your consciousness. When it comes there, you realize, oh, it was always there. But before I came there, it was sort of just beneath the surface. But when it comes up,
100%. Yeah.
yeah. But when it comes up, it's there all of a sudden. And I believe there's a reason, and I want to explore that a little bit. I would like to ask you a question first, though. You have children, and these experiences that you remember now or are remembering now about your father and his discipline ways and his perhaps showing off with that in the way that you've described, you have repeated those behaviors down to your children?
No, absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
It's been if anything, it's been a gift because I don't know why, but at like 4 years old, I was literally saying to myself, I'm not going to be like these assholes. Like I knew it from the minute I could articulate it that that was not how I wanted to parent. So if there was a gift, it was that was crystal clear from day one. And so I kind of went the complete other way.
But you would consider yourself and you would describe yourself as a conscious parent.
For sure. Yeah.
And so, how about the comparison of how you've turned out with what you were shown by your father?
Again, I mean, I think it was just everything to me is either an example or a lesson. And I feel like I was taught a lesson of what I didn't want to do. Um,
So, what I'm pointing
so,
out
yeah,
is that you were successful.
right.
Isn't that good to know?
It is good to know. And I think as it comes up, Tommy, it's not, there's a split second, maybe a minute, where I'm not happy with the feeling because I feel the humiliation
Mm.
or the shame or whatever he's trying to put me through. Followed almost immediately with an internal dialogue that's very similar to the one that we're having now,
Mm.
which is A, this has always been there. Isn't it interesting that I can just see it now and see it super clear like it's always been there?
Mm.
B, what's the good that came from it? C, do I need to do anything with this right now?
Mm.
Do I need to act on this in any way? Or can I let it go? Do I need to, sit down with him? Do I need to talk to somebody? And in general, that's been the process of these things coming up.
Yes, beautiful. So we began with this idea that I believe there's always a reason for these memories and a purpose. You beautifully expressed that you believe everything is some validation or a lesson. There's something to be learned there. So the validation part for me in what you're describing is you held true to what you wanted to be and that you were an extraordinary father and a conscious father, and you didn't fall into the same trap of repeating behaviors that were present for you from your dad in your childhood. So that's really cool. The aspect of this that I relate to personally in my life has to do with this idea of being cursed, receiving a curse from a parent. So, for example, my father used to say, in his frustration with me as a younger man of my decisions around money and career and what I was or wasn't going to do, he would say, we'd get frustrated and we'd have heated arguments. And he would say, when you're 40, you're not going to have a pot to piss in. And that's a curse. He didn't mean it that way. He really didn't. What he wanted to express to me was, I'm so concerned that you're going to end up the way I did. That's what he wanted to say. And the communication that he would have made from a more aware place about what I just said, the communication would have been, I love you. I trust you. I know you'll work it out. And I'm here to support you and celebrate you along the way. That's what he actually meant to say. So that's me reframing a curse into a blessing. And that's what I had to do. You may not have to do that, but that's what I had to do to liberate myself from any resentment and any of the energy of that curse. For when I was approaching 40 years old, I was in extraordinary debt. And you know what I started to think about right before my 40th birthday? Those words. I can't remember the last time I thought about them. But as I approached 40, all of a sudden I'd wake up in the morning. When you're 40, you're not going to have a pot to piss in. That shit was right there in my mind. Had been there all along, but I wasn't aware of it. Wow. The power of words. Now, my father loved me very much, and I loved him very much. And while we had our challenges and differences, he wanted the best for me, and I know he wanted the best for me, and he wants the best for me now. But those things that we say or communicate is coming out of unconsciousness. And part of my forgiving, part of my release, part of my healing, and my letting myself off the hook was to forgive my father for moments of unconsciousness and to ask myself, have I ever had those? Just a few billion in my life. So I understand from a place of compassion that my father really had a lot of fear. And in that particular moment, or those particular moments, that fear would dominate him. And he would say things that later on would end up having some weight. Now, I could play the role of victim and say, wow, if my father hadn't said that, I wouldn't have been in debt, at that time in my life. But the truth of the matter is as an adult, I realize that I'm responsible for my life. I have held on to resentment, and maybe there's been, the key word these days is trauma, but I don't love it for me so much. I don't love it for me so much. I prefer to say that I held on to some things that didn't serve me, and later on I was able to release them through the work of consciousness and awareness and all of this. So interestingly, my life was really nothing like my father's. And when I approached 40 years old, even though I was struggling financially, my life was a beautiful and brilliant life. And I was working on healing the financial aspect of my life, which I did. And I got to experience wonderful abundance in this life as well. And so my father, from beyond this plane, he celebrates that. And he's so excited, But I had to do the work of reframing the curse into a blessing to really understand, that's not what my father really would have said to me if he was present and conscious and calm and not freaked out by his own fear. He would have told me, you got this, man. I believe in you. I really believe in you. So on the topic of having to go back and speak with your father, I can't advise you one way or the other, but I can say this. Forgiveness and healing take place at multiple levels in lots of different ways for different people at different times. Sometimes we need to go communicate something. But usually in matters of forgiveness, if we're going to communicate something with someone who has been less than conscious with us in their behavior, very often we miss the blind spot of going to receive their approval or their apology, or to see if they've changed. And we can be incredibly disappointed if we go with that agenda. Here's a reframe on that. If your father is uncomfortable in any way in his life, in any way, ask yourself if there's a way that you can make him more comfortable. Anything. And would it bring comfort to his life? at this point, knowing what you know, for you to bring this up and express what it was for you. Sometimes it's important to have the conversation and to say something, but not from a place of need, not from a place of looking for anything, but a declaration of something. Sometimes it's important to do that. Truly. Other times, you've healed so much. You've become so steady in your own self that you no longer need the thing that you would have needed as a child at that time when it wasn't there for you. And in your total lack of need in this moment to receive something that you didn't receive before, you can then reframe the whole situation. What can I do to put this man at ease in his old age? I'm so steady. I'm wondering how I can bring a greater level of ease to the situation. Now, again, sometimes it's important to have the conversation, and only you can know. There are people who have been terribly abused, and I mean terribly, terribly abused by a parent or by an uncle or by somebody. And they need to go back and tell that person that they are aware of what took place and that it wasn't okay. That part of their healing is to express that. And sometimes that's important. And so we have to judge and look at the situation, ask ourselves where we are, what's necessary, what brings harmony, what brings release, what brings presence, what is necessary here, what do I need, what are the needs of others, what action can I take that brings a further sense of release and harmony rather than potential disappointment and hurt. I can tell you that in my relationship with my father, I wish I had the opportunity to go back and do a few things over again. For sure. I wish I could have been more compassionate and understanding of his inability to help himself in his later years and his stuckness in addiction, which he would never have called addiction, but which I saw so blatantly that way because he more or less ate himself to death. And so I wonder if I had it to do over again, could I be a little less argumentative? I was coming out of fear of losing my father, fear of losing, this love of my life in this terrible way. And all of my effort and all of my fear did nothing except create some aggravation. I'm not kidding. I'm not coming at this from a place of woe is me. I'm just reporting in from the field that I have forgiven myself. I understand why I did everything I did. And with a do-over, I could have brought more grace to the situation. So I share that with you because your dad is still alive. And so you have an opportunity to think, what conversation would I like to have at this point that 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years from now, I can look back on that and say, that was one of the most badass, graceful moments of my entire life. That's what I would think about if I were you at this moment. Tell me what comes up for you in hearing these things.
Well, I think what you're talking about right now is exactly what's been going through my mind is I don't feel like I owe him anything, and I don't feel like I need anything back at this point, nor do I feel like I'm carrying resentment. It's all just a bit gray, right? It's all just or whatever, it's okay. I'm not spending a lot of mental space on it, except when these things come up. That said, we lost my mom, years ago, and she was suicidal when we were younger. And he's on the same track your dad is at. He's already eaten through a lap band and probably weighs, 350 or something. And she did it the old-fashioned way, kind of prescription drugs and alcohol and stuff like that. My mom was the complete opposite, not to open a different can of worms, but again, just for the context, is on the surface, she would have looked like the failed parent, suicidal attempts, mental instability, addictions, all of this. But she had the big heart. She showed us all the love. You never had to like reach for my mom's love. Yet I shunned her at the end of her life because, she didn't live up to my expectations. And so she's the one that I sort of go back and go, well, if I had 5 more minutes, if I could have a different conversation, if I could have better understood addiction back then, because I was addicted back then, just not maybe as bad as her, in my viewpoint. And so that's how I'm viewing this right now is, do I want to look back on this moment, these moments, and be good with where I'm at with all of this, to be proud of this moment, because I am at a point where I have that strength to make the moment. I'm not a victim in this moment. I'm not a player in this moment. I can make this moment if I want to, right? I can make it something different. Don't owe it to anyone, don't have to do it. That's actually what makes it more empowering, in a way.
The only thing I can say to that is, you owe it in a sense to yourself.
Yeah.
And that's for you. And the forgiveness that we give anybody is really for us to set ourselves free. And I'm not suggesting that you need to forgive your father or not forgive your father, and that hasn't already been done. And so I'm just understanding that you've already done your work. And so I wish for you what I wish for me and everybody is harmony and freedom, and the ability to see the whole picture clearly as much as possible. And if there's something that your father needs, you wouldn't be giving it to him because you owed it to him.
Right. True.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Ken. I'm really grateful for the inquiry, and you've certainly inspired me and provoked me to think about some things myself. So super grateful there.